What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, reviewing today Rage 2. From the very start of mankind, a lot of people have tried to guess how it's eventually all going to end. What will actually make us go extinct? Could it be something like a huge world war where we all get nuked? Could it be something like a plague that spreads across the planet and nobody is immune to it? Or could it be something much more random that comes from space? I mean, we sort of need to keep in mind the very famous Chuck Palahniuk quote, "On a long enough timeline, the survival rate for everyone drops to 0. Now this is basically just a fancy way of saying that you and I are going to die, but sometimes death isn't always the worst part. You see, this game takes place in a universe that was eventually smacked by a giant asteroid. It came down and in a millisecond, almost every single person alive, whether they be an old person or a baby or just a random dog walking down the street, even plants, were all vaporized in a singular microsecond, wiping out 99% of the population. But those that are left behind, well, they sort of have a very different existence now. They live only to survive. Mankind ended up reverting back to sort of a tribal species, basically clanning together with anybody nearby and trying to just scrounge every single weapon they can, a couple more bullets, and of course, all the food they can carry. It's an existence that you think would be very bleak, but surprisingly, Rage 2, in my opinion, is a very bright, very colorful, and very fun game. Within this world, we actually have a very special job, which is putting on the boots of the very last ranger. We are essentially like a super cop. We have abilities like having the talents to regenerate health, charge people instantaneously with enough force to kill them in a microsecond, or even do things like snap your fingers and actually blow the armor off somebody's living body. Now, each of these skills might make you sound like you're going to be extremely overpowered, but when the entire world is out there trying to freaking skin you alive, well, these skills aren't as strong as you might think. Now, obviously, as you look at this game, I'm sure it's already very apparent, this is a first-person shooter. And what's kind of interesting is that it constantly tries to take itself very seriously in a lot of different aspects. This is a heavily focused, very centered style of shooter. It doesn't matter what's going on the outside, you're not having to eat food, you're not having to worry about living. All you need to do is worry about making sure you have a couple more bullets in your clip and make sure you can walk over that next hill to shoot the next bad guy. But this is truly what I absolutely loved about Rage 2. It has a story, but it's honestly pretty loose. Essentially the way it works is that there are all these different clans that are roaming across the world, most of them pretty good, some of them very evil. You're going to be constantly encountering people like very malnourished bandits who could be dropped with just a couple shots. You're going to see people with nice heavy suits of armor who are able to actually deflect your freaking bullets with their laser swords. But then the greatest threat of all is people that are called the Authority. These are mechanized cyborg-like humans who have mutated themselves into absolutely hideous monsters and now actually consider themselves the highest life form, the true evolution of mankind in this time of tragedy. Well, obviously, I'm sure hearing that description, you can imagine that these guys are grade A jerks, and trying to take them down is a pretty hard task. To be honest, these dudes are rough, but even dying against them is sort of the joys of this game. Being a ranger in the Outback, it's our job to try and go from town to town, pick up some quests, wipe out all the bad guys nearby, and get some very needed upgrades. A huge motivation in this game is the fact that rangers are all given very special gear that allows them to do absolutely insane things. Like, look at this freaking gun. I actually have like a special pistol that fires bullets, and whenever I want, I can actually make them explode into fire. So if I can sneak up behind an enemy, I can light them up like a 4th of July before they can even react. Stuff like this is very interesting because these guns only work for the ranger. But this does bring me to the only thing in the game that I actually hated, which is how weapons work in general. So you're seeing all sorts of cool stuff in this, like rifles and shotguns and plasma guns and all that, but there is a downside to this, which is that you'll notice I'm never able to actually pick up the weapons that enemies use. They are just completely invisible. The second something falls out of somebody's hand, it essentially disintegrates, which means that the only way to get new weapons is to unlock them with side quests. One of the most important parts of this world is the fact that since everything's been wiped out, there was a secret survival plan called the Ark System, where basically all these different huge special pods full of people and supplies and stuff would come out of the orbit. Well, now they've all crash landed and they're all across the Earth, and you can find these Arks and open them up to get special gear that only a ranger can utilize. The problem is that most of the time when you find these, they'll require a puzzle, or you have to kill a bunch of waves of enemies, and once you're inside, you don't really know what you're going to get. It could be another super ability that's absolutely awesome, or it could just be a little tiny crappy gun you don't really want. And so basically, you spend many hours in this game just trying to unlock the arsenal. And really the problem with that is that instead of creating a nice sense of constant progression, it kind of just slowed me down. I ended up getting stuck with weapons I didn't really like for big chunks of the game and just sort of waiting for that next big upgrade. I ended up just hunting down a bunch of Arks about midway through the experience because I was like, okay, I want the big guns now. It's not a huge issue, but I do feel like it ended up killing the pacing about midway through because I just wanted to shoot. I just wanted to have that nice instantaneous gratification of going, okay, now I can pull the trigger and achieve stuff. But beyond this, I actually think that Rage 2 is super good in every other way. Like just as a random example, so this is a first-person shooter, but it also has a heavy centering on car combat if you choose to do so. Now this stuff is pretty much optional other than a couple like story quests, but predominantly you can hop into any vehicle in the game. Random bad guys, a cool motorcycle you find, or even just this, like here's a random tank, but as you're cruising down the road, you'll see different people who just live on the streets. Sometimes there'll be like a special caravan that'll like trade with you, or you'll find people like this guy who just wanted to drag race me across town, which is absolutely a blast. There's also huge enemy convoys that if you're able to systematically dismantle piece by piece using your machine guns can give you giant upgrades, and all of this is super fun. I like the fact that the map is just crammed full of stuff. There's all sorts of outposts you can destroy to get extra experience points to buy more upgrades, or you can also do stuff like just go and freaking blow stuff up to unlock new fast travel. I mean, all over the place there are different things that are super fun, and by doing them, you are perpetually rewarded by just great talent trees. Essentially the way it works is that there are a couple main NPCs, the main characters who are trying to help you in your Operation Dagger, the mission to take down the Authority once and for all. Well, each of these people has a different speciality themselves, and by actually doing things out in the wasteland, you can get additional talent points to unlock once you've gotten their help. So you can do things like just get better regeneration, bigger clip sizes, faster reloading. You can make it where if you actually go into the talent tree revolving cars, it makes it where you can actually not only steal any car, but put them in your garage and instantaneously spawn them whenever you want. So you really have a lot of different types of ways to play, whether you're an outback person, somebody who just wants to go to the indoor dungeons, or if you're somebody who just never wants to explore, you absolutely can just survive the way you want to survive. This creates such a fullness to the experience, where it really feels like every single time I'm picking up the controller, I am just completely flooded with things around me. Mission markers, objectives, side quests, bad guys, bounties. Everybody is constantly just screaming for your help, and it's so fun getting to be the last super cop in the universe. You feel strong, you feel epic, and you want to try and save this wasteland, because even though it may look like just a blown out random hole in the ground, it is your hole in the ground. I love saving this world, and I freaking love playing Rage 2. The only other very tiny issue I have is that occasionally there are some weird difficulty spikes. Most of the game is actually relatively simple and quite easy to handle, but then there will just be random bosses that give you no health kits and they have like 1,000,000 HP and you just end up dying against them 25 times. It's not a huge detriment, but it's just one of those weird things where it definitely seems like there was something that needed to be a little bit more balanced out. But either way, even when I was dying or being torn apart by super mutants, it was exceedingly exciting just to re-enter this chaotic wasteland. Okay, so we've heard some good and some bad, but let's go to the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving Rage 2 a 9 out of 10. Now, this may sound a little bit weird here at the end, but I just want to say that this does, in my opinion, have a very Borderlands feel to it. Not quite just in the jokes and not just how much it's trying to be bright and colorful, but just in the moment-to-moment movement. Just the way you actually get around the world, the way you actually shoot things, the way you're trying to constantly time your special moves. This does sort of feel like somebody trying to create their own version of Borderlands, and in that way, they very much succeeded, while also simultaneously walking their own path. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Man, I am just genuinely impressed that this game turned out as good as it did. Man, I love it. I love to be surprised like that. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.